No, 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 no heroes. Woo! No, 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 no heroes. No heroes, baby.
Hey guys, it's Skip once again, coming at you with week 7 of the German NCL. We have Chris against HANNO, and Chris has to pilot the BY versus Blackbeard matchup once again. And we can see HANNO already finding his very first Burgess. Chris answering with his Flampe signature play. He also did this in every single game against Arman last week. And Chris was actually able to win the unfavored matchup in that one. So we will see if we can do it again. HANNO definitely has a good start with stage, already having a Burgess. Lafitte now into playing the era as well. Finding another Burgess if he wants to, and HANNO does seem to be a big fan of the Burgess. Discarding a Shigan to use his stage. Now that he has 2 Burgess already, maybe looking to find some 10 costs. Yeah, there he takes the first 10 cost. Back at Chris. Does he have the Kusan here? As we saw in the match against Arman, Chris does not like to starve in this matchup. He goes aggressive. He just attacks Teach basically the entire game, and we likely will see Flampe swing into this Lafitte here. And since she's just swinging for 1, we can assume that there's a Kusan coming down. But Chris is actually thinking here, so maybe not that clear of a place. He might have other options. Does go for the 5k into grabbing 2 Don, so maybe thinking about playing double babies here, which is, I mean, it can work out, but it can also backfire. But I think since you know that your opponent has 2 Burgess already, oh, he's actually going for a 5-drop here. That's very interesting. And wisely enough, Chris decided to not utilize the push on his leader when attacking, risking his 5-drop to die against finger pistol from trigger. So HANNO starting off using his stage to discard a black hole, finding a Doc Q. We will likely see a Burgess come down this turn, I would assume. And a swing from leader into the Flampe. HANNO at 7 cards in hand right now. Does not have to use his leader ability yet. Plays down that Burgess. 1 more Don to maybe resolve a search event, but no, he just passes the turn. Over to Chris now at 6, who might play a Fist Luffy or a Sabo here. And we will see. Yeah, there's the Sabo. Still getting that cycle in, maybe discarding some Gecko Morias if you have too many. I think it's an interesting spot. Like, what if you only have 1 Gecko? Do you just always discard it? Probably. Obviously, it depends on the rest of your hand, but you also do want to set up a situation where you can punish Teach when he doesn't lead ability at some point, and the longer the game goes, it will eventually get to that game state, since, I mean, if he plays 1 card from hand, potentially counters the swing, and uses lead ability for a couple of turns, then quickly Teach will find himself with potentially no cards in hand. So again, trashing Shigan here, which is useless in this game state since the Sabo effect is actually online. And Chris really utilizing that 5-drop to just swing, and HANNO feeling forced to attach some Don to the Burgess and swing into this Rocket Luffy, which Chris decides to simply block, preserving the card draw on the rocket, which I find interesting. Also interesting that HANNO decided to attach all the Don to Burgess instead of going for a 6k swing with his leader. Like, that would force a card out of Chris' hand, and then you can still run it over, because the Burgess is 6k baseline minimum. I think he's rather 7k probably. Don't know the exact count of HANNO's trash right now, but I don't really see the downside to attaching one to leader. And then if he just lets it go, you don't have to rest your Burgess. So 9k into Burgess here potentially. 2k, 1k, so Burgess is actually at 7. And now 10k into Burgess. Burgess might now with a counter actually jump up to 8. But yeah, lets it go, so really curious. Chris now deciding to let the Rocket Luffy go. Not wanting HANNO to swing into it. To find a Lafitte, which is, I mean, in this late in the game, not the greatest card anymore, but HANNO still looking for something, so does not have 2 more Burgess here, which would have been very strong, of course. Just keeps searching, does find a 10 drop there. And now, having spent 3 Don, he has 6 Don left to play with. Which can be awkward here, but he does have another Burgess, yeah. Now 2 Don, what are we going to do with those? Doc Q doesn't really do much, so at this point we start to lead ability. Which is quite interesting. I mean, there's a Flampe in trash, but I don't think there was a second Awakener, so maybe just wanting to stop an Awakening turn here. Like, very likely. Of course, we're able to go another Flampe into Hiyori, play some babies, potentially develop 2 5 drops, make his leader very big, put you down at 1. Then already could be quite dangerous to play Teach if there's a Raigo incoming and you're still facing 2 swings. So Chris contemplating what to do with his 10 Don here. Starting off with a 5k at life, which gets countered out easily. And then just dropping double fist Luffy's. So really putting on the pressure. We do know that HANNO has a 10 drop, and he obviously has more than one 10 drop, because he starts off by discarding 1 for a search here. Taking a liberation, no, not liberation, black hole, and actually swinging 5 here because he's threatening lethal. Just dropping that 10 cost, freezing and disabling one of the fist Luffy's, and discarding the black hole that he just searched to his lead ability. 2 cards in hand. And yeah, it's looking a bit like this is a fairly rough spot for Chris. He will need to put some blockers down because 3 attacks. Oh, he does have the Raigo and can now awaken with his 1 punch Luffy. That is really strong. Still having 2 Don remaining to play another 5 cost out of his life via baby. And able to swing 8-9 in the process, likely putting HANNO down to 0 life. And then HANNO will have to go for game himself. The question is, he discarded that that black hole last turn, so question is if he has another of those to disable a potential blocker and then go for game with his leader and the 2 Burges. But Chris also does have a lot of cards in hand. Discarding a Gecko for his leader. Putting 2 Rockets in life, swinging 8. Swinging 9, so no baby. But HANNO does trigger picking up a Van Augur and also growing these Burges even more. So these Burges should be something like 9 or 10k right now. Utilizing stage. Taking another stage. And just starting off with a 5k, so we discarded a 10 drop earlier, so we can assume that there's more. Swinging at the Fist Luffy, because otherwise HANNO would simply be dead, but still he has to face a Hiyori and a leader swing, so Hiyori might be able to take it down here. Just starting off 7 with leader will give you good information. Also just start with a baby, but this forces you... Yeah, you can... he does have Raigo as well, so actually just a 9k, which requires a perfect hand, which HANNO does have. But now drawing a card, popping the Lafitte, and going back to 2 life. Discarding a 1k, so Chris probably is quite stacked on counter cards. And all of HANNO's attacks will have to connect. Four, and 3. So discarding this card to lead ability. These Burges are, I think, 12k, was that? So that's at 5. So that was triple 2k and a 1k. So the Burgess is 11, I guess. Chris able to just counter it out, therefore winning game 1. So players quickly shuffling up and going into game 2. Alright, here we are back again. Chris was not happy with his first hand, but HANNO kept his right away. First game, Chris apparently won the die roll because he went second, which is to be preferred in this matchup. And now this next hand, Chris will have to stick with. And will we see the trend continuing of Chris just being able to overcome this bad matchup for him. And we see the trend continuing of Chris having Flampe on his very first turn. But HANNO also has the stage, so ready to prepare, grabbing his pieces. Again, finds the Burgess. But now on the second curve, you are able to go Burgess on 4, Burgess on 6, double Burgess on 8. That's the dream. Taking the 6k, deploying a Garb and potentially another Searcher. Does find a baby Luffy here. And following up with a Bonds to then take a 5-cost Sabo. And yeah, we saw last game that Chris went for this Hiyori baby Luffy play on Fordon, which really paid off, applying the pressure. And there's Burgess number 1 coming down. Chris on his 5 Don turn. We know he has the Sabo, so worst case he could deploy that, and because it has an on play as the only one of the 3 5-cost brothers, it makes a lot of sense to just get that out of your system right now, get some cycle going, and also protect your board so you can't get finger pistoled. But really thinking hard on what to discard here. As Torben and I already mentioned in the game of Chris and Arman, it's quite a good strategy as BY to get a Kuzan into your trash as soon as possible, so you can threaten Gecko for Kuzan even before your 10 Don turn, forcing Teach to respect that and use his leader ability 1 or even 2 turns earlier. Well, actually 1 turn earlier, I guess. But as long as you're not awakened, he doesn't really need to use it at all, depending on how far you are away from awakening. So let's see what HANNO can do here on his 6th Don turn. Does he find another Burgess? No, just going for a hard play Laboon and discarding Shigan to use his lead ability. So not the ideal play here. I'm curious why exactly he wants to lead ability in this spot. I guess to prevent something like Flampe into Rocket Luffy, which could blow up this Laboon, and also stopping another Sabo, which would then allow him to go for Laboon Dock Q to clear one of the 5 drops next turn. So yeah, that makes sense. Countering a 5k swing here. And another 5k coming in. So Chris really putting on the pressure once again. HANNO at 5 cards, thinking giving another 2k here, which the deck does not have too many of, so you gotta wonder what HANNO's hand texture looks like. He could just send another 5 here, honestly, with Flampe, and I think that's what we might see. Kuzan doesn't really do much here, and how else are you gonna spend these 4 Don? You've seen that the 5k swings are uncomfortable for your opponent, so I personally really like the 5k Flampe swing here. But at the same time, you will lose all your board, going for a 6 first, and then dropping that Kuzan without drawing a card. So yeah, let's keep this spot in mind. It was definitely a key spot here. Chris could have maybe even put HANNO down to 1 here, because after having used two 2Ks already, chances are fairly good that he doesn't have a third, so he either has to give you a good 1K to the flampe swing, or he takes both swings even, unless he gets a 2K from his life. But there, HANNO does find that coveted Burgess, and now could have enough done to go Laboon into Docu. Clears the gap with his leader. And actually going Shigan, okay, so deciding not to play his second Burgess here, but instead clearing the entire board, which totally makes sense being at 2 life only with 3 cards in hand. But the Docu is also a card invested that Chris might not clear. But then again, you do have this Laboon Docu engine still stuck at 3 life, so this is also what crystallized itself out of the last match from Chris against Arman, that when BY is at 3 life, they struggle a lot more than when they get to that threshold of 2 life at least. Every single life is a step closer towards that awakening, which then, of course, enables so many additional play lines for Chris. So on his 9 Dawn turn, he starts with the 7K swing at life, which HANNO has to take, and just follows up with a big 9. Not 9, it's an 8. Yeah. So HANNO down to 0 already, but now he will be able to clear this flampe and hits his 10 Dawn turn. So we might very well see a teach hit the board here. That's the only blocker that's not just gonna die to a Rocket Luffy. So you have to see if you can survive a Raigo after you play your teach. Discarding a 1K here. So HANNO doesn't seem bricked up at the very least. Does go minus 1K in counter here though, for that black hole. Yeah, we do see the removal of that flampe just by tapping Docu. And now there's a tough choice ahead of HANNO. He does just drop that 10 drop using his lead ability and passes his turn. So yeah, quite an interesting spot. I mean, Raigo here would mean that your teach gets cleared, but if you can counter out of the 9K, then you are facing against 1 life. And HANNO giving 2K double 1K here. And since this 10 drop now lived, I think now you are sort of reaching a spot where by deploying another 10 drop you will be able to stay alive. Because although Chris took 3 cards from HANNO's hand this turn, he did not develop any board himself. And with 2 teaches sticking around, there's no way for Chris to summon enough attacks, I mean without a board of course, to threaten HANNO's life. So HANNO starting off by discarding a Laboon to find a 2K here. But at some point HANNO will have to start swinging. And I think it's quite clear that he does have another 10 drop, because otherwise the Lafitte Surge would come quite naturally. And it's sort of, the question is, what is the worst thing that your opponent can do when you awaken him, but also disable his on-plays. So starting with a 5k that Chris actually counters. Still at 7 or 8 cards in hand. I think it's 8 cards for Chris. And yeah, HANNO recognizes that he has to end this game at some point. Like another 15k swing to the face. He might not be able to counter out of, like for sure he cannot. If he plays another card from hand. Which he needs to survive Raigo. So Burgess now coming in for a very big number. Or did the Burgess already hit? Chris seems to be thinking. I mean, he countered the first 5, then he took the second 5, right? Yeah. And now he's contemplating what to do about this Burgess swing, but... Oh no, okay. It was HANNO who was thinking. Never mind. So the Garb he used was also countered with Rocket Luffy and Garb, the double 5Ks. Now is HANNO thinking if he should swing, or did he already pass his turn and Chris is just thinking? I'm a bit confused here. Yeah, HANNO just passes. I mean, you instantly lose to Raigo if you swing, so I don't think you need to go for that. You're not that desperate. And if there's Raigo 9k swing, then you have very good chances of just killing on the crackback. So, what can Chris do here? Still no on-plays available. Right, because HANNO was at 3 cards. The Burgess as a 10k right now. What's the best way for Chris to win this? The issue with developing 2 5-drops is that you sort of instantly... Oh, he does have on-plays. Okay, yeah. I wasn't 100% sure. And Chris does have that combo of the 1 card awakening, so to say. I mean, 1 awakener at 2 life gets you there if you have the Fist Luffy. So now the question is, does he have the baby Sabo as well? Discarding for lead ability and then playing 1 baby and going for a 13k swing could force HANNO to give up his blocker. Going up to 9k with a blocker and 1 life. I mean, we saw HANNO search Shiryu, I think last turn, but I'm not sure if he discarded it, because he shuffled his trash, so not sure if the Shiryu on top is the one he discarded, but no, yeah, exactly. He still has the Shiryu, so he can block and keep his teach around, which is super crucial here. Discarding a Burgess that we found, and he does find the black hole, so being able to disable the blocker and then go for game swinging with his Burgess and his double teaches, and yeah, he does have it. So HANNO tying it up, and we are going to see a game 3 here. Chris will be able to go second again though, which we saw was quite the relevant factor here. Alright, let's see if the players like their starting hands. Chris once again does not. HANNO's thinking. Seems like a rather tricky decision. I assume one of the main priorities is if you see that stage, because that then simply enables you to find your remaining pieces. So both players taking their mulligan and having to stick with what they now get presented by their deck. And we'll see if HANNO can start off with a stage. No, he does have the arrow though, which finds 3 relevant targets. I don't think Doc Q is that good in this matchup, but the Burgess certainly is, and so is the Lafitte. And HANNO actually deciding to take the Lafitte. And Chris never fails us, he does have Flampe turn 1 once again. No Garb or Search Event to follow it up though. Lafitte now finding a Burgess himself. I suppose the reasoning for taking Lafitte is just that your main priority is getting stage. And yeah, Lafitte simply helps you do that, while Burgess obviously doesn't. Chris doesn't have Kuzan himself though, so just dropping down a Navigator Nami. HANNO now did get stage from either live or his top deck draw. Is able to discard that black hole. Taking a Dock Q instead. And dropping down that Burgess. Not deciding to... Oh yeah, we are actually not swinging into the rested Flampe. Okay. I mean, we saw Makino go for lethals, and we saw Hiyori go for lethals, and this Flampe has already swung multiple times as well, so maybe just forgetting on HANNO's part there. And yeah, this Makino is also really crucial. If she can find a 5-drop, then it can lead to very explosive turns for the BY player. Swinging 5 here, HANNO takes. Going into his 7 Dawn turn now. Discarding stage with stage. Finding a Van Ogre. And just deploying that one right away and probably passing turn. So yeah, I mean, these bodies are, apart from Sabo, they are small, but not to be underestimated. Like, as we've seen before, and as I've stated, every one of these bodies can be lethal. Like, this is Chris's 8 Dawn turn, and if he were to just start swinging, he could put like 4 Dawn on Flampe, maybe even 3 Dawn on the Navigator Nami, and then go for like 5-5-5-7 or 5-5-6-6. which would then put a large toll on HANNO's hand size. But with the information that Chris has about his life, he might have very different plans involving a powerful tempo baby. So he could do things like play a 5-drop, play his baby. Still has on plays available, so many more options as well. What is Chris cooking up? Okay, interesting. Starting off with a 6k, which immediately gets a 2k from HANNO. And does have Fury into Punch Luffy potentially once again to already awaken. Okay, it's just Hiyori into Baby Luffy. Oh, he simply decided to not put anything in his life, using Hiyori as sort of a pseudo flampe without the card draw. Which is obviously worse, but gets the job done. Wow, now this gets really strong. $11k, yeah, and you're not going to counter that one. And now Chris is presenting 2 5-drops, which you are not going to be able to remove, and you're not at 10 done yet. So HANNO might be in trouble here. Seems like there was some question or issue. How do you deal with this board now that you cannot KO anything? Like, the answer is you don't. You just have to develop your own. Maybe find some resources to defend yourself with. HANNO does have a lot of cards in hand. So this turn he will definitely be using that leader ability to prevent any Gecko Moria plays from Chris. Starting off with a Lafitte. Not really the Don usage you want to see on your 9 Don turn, when your opponent can just clear the Lafitte with one of his small characters without any issue. Finding a Burgess there though, so that's potentially good. How much Don do we have left? I think it's 6, right? So there is a world in which we just play Burgess and swing with our other Burgess, but that of course exposes him to the elements. But you do take a blocker card or life from Chris, which could be crucial as well. And then again, if Chris swings into the Burgess, how sad are you really? Because that means that a big swing is not headed towards your life. But HANNO decides against it. Granted, I'm not even sure how big this Burgess is right now. But he should be 7k at least, so I think a swing could have been made. But you're also like, okay, Chris has like 8 or 9 cards in hand, probably. Is it really worth it to take one of those away and expose my Burgess in the process? Notably, HANNO did discard a 10 drop, so we can assume that there's probably 2 more sitting in his hand. Starting off with a 7k is really uncomfortable. HANNO actually taking it, so sort of inviting an all-in here from Chris. If he does have a baby Luffy and can then follow up. Okay, he does search for the baby Luffy. If he finds it, this would be devastating for HANNO. He does find a 5-drop Sabo. Going for another 7k here, so perfectly content with just deploying another blocker, not going all in. And yeah, forcing HANNO to counter this. I guess if you know that you can survive the follow-up swing, that would be 12, right? Then you can take it and yeah, try to bait your opponent into going for it. And then kill him against 1 up life 5k. And he does have the baby Luffy. No, that's backbreaking. Allowing him to go 7k with 2 up life or even 9k with 1 up life, depending on if he has a baby Sabo in hand. Does not go for a baby, just a 10k swing. I mean, there might still be a baby. Actually, this is the better order anyway, because the size of the swing doesn't really matter and you don't risk your Sabo getting Shigan triggered. So HANNO now facing an insurmountable task. His Burgess is at 9k, or they are, but you are facing 2 blockers, 1 life, and how many cards in hand? Chris will draw, so up to 3 cards now in hand, I think. It's either 3 or 4. Chris really putting his foot on the gas right here. That Makino was really clutch, revealing a 5-drop in his life, enabling him to go for some sick tempo turns, also finding all the babies he needs. So how does HANNO maximize his chances of winning here? Chris does have 4 cards in hand. He did use the Rocket Luffy, so you could make the assumption that he needed the draw. Give yourself some hope. Like, you're really desperate when your opponent doesn't even use the rocket and they're just like, yeah, I know I cannot die. So there is maybe a tiny sliver of hope. Let's assume double event, and then you could discard your last card, maybe getting these Burgess up to 10k. You have 2 more Dawn left remaining, could attach 1 to each of them, but HANNO does discard his dark hole, black hole event. Maybe he can survive 1 more turn by freezing the Fist Luffy, swinging into the Sabo, and then trying to survive the split of leader and the other Sabo. That does seem like a better chance than going for 11-11, even if you do have double events. So what does HANNO take here? He's counting counter, seeing how much he needs to survive, if he can at all. So a pivotal decision here, this stage search for HANNO. He does currently have 6 cards in hand, will pick up a 7th. Counting his trash. maybe thinking about the implications of throwing his entire hand into the trash after double event. How big can these burges get? Asking Chris for how many 2Ks he has in trash likely does take the Van Augur, so deciding for counter power here. Now 6k into the Sabo surely won't hurt. Trashing Ice Age to his lead ability. Using Shigan on Sabo, milling 2 additional cards, so Shigan is obviously even stronger here. Using Van Augur Doc Q, so that's even better than what I was thinking about. And these burges are, let's count again, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So the burges are exactly at 11 and can now come in for 13 each, which would require 2k, 2k, 1k from Chris in his 4 cards, which is very, very, very possible. And he does have 2k triple 1k. So getting up to 11, 12, 13, 14, exactly countering out of it. So he did in fact need to use that Rocket Luffy and find a counter from the top.